Okay, hello and welcome to the comprehensive video on how to build tracks and trains by Ymrich. Now, since I'm too lazy to edit this video and I don't really have the time, I'll try and fit everything you really need to know into this one video. So it's probably gonna be a little longer, but if you have a second screen like you should, you can maybe watch this while you're building or trying the things I'm gonna speak about out. So shouldn't really be an issue. And anyway, if you're gonna build trailways in Planet Nomads, it's gonna take a lot of time. It's a very time-intensive activity, let's say. So I've loaded a previous save from maybe a few months ago, where I was still building this giant flying base, which is unfinished here in this save. Since that was pretty much the only save I had with enough resources and at a good place where to try out all of these all of the elements I want to show you, which you will be using if you decide to use my system of track building. So we already have a train built. Later on I'll show you another train or how that's done using the blueprints. It's a multi-car trains, and those trains, probably the first thing I should start with, if you print these, um, they have like Planet Nomads is a pretty buggy game, and these trains have a particular property, which is if you go out of their physics range and return back to it, the train will go haywire and best case scenario just totally derails, or worst case scenario crashes the game. So you always have to adhere to procedure, which is before you're gonna leave the physics vicinity of the train, it's best to anchor it to the ground. When you get back, you make a new save game, and then you load the game where you're in the physics range of the train, and then you should be fine. Then you just can remove the anchors and you can drive. The train doesn't necessarily go haywire if you just if you leave it unanchored, go away and return back. But it will definitely once you get in and start driving. So even if you don't anchor the train to the ground when you leave physics range, make sure before you start driving that you save the game and load it again. I'll try and show it to you later on. So now we're at the end of the track, and first thing I'm going to show you is how you build a straight track. Okay, if I can get to the printers, which are not very conveniently only accessible. No, I don't need to get to the printers, wait. Sorry, I just need the replicator. So for your convenience, I've created a whole set of tracks which are more described, or in the descriptions of which you see the size of their pylon. The length is pretty much the same for all of the track segments, and they're divided into left-handed LH and right-handed ones. The left-handed or right-handed information tells you where on which side is the pylon. So if I select here, we're gonna go with a small pylon, and let's see. And if you look in the direction where you're driving, then pylons are on the right-hand side here. So you're gonna need a short right-hand sided pylon. So that's track with short pylon right-handed. That's this one. Okay. So the difference between, like, obviously you can just turn it around, a right-handed one, and then it's a left-handed one, left-handed segment. The difference is if I pick a right-handed segment, that means if I place the pylon on the right-hand side, then I'm facing the shorter end of the track, which is more convenient for building. So now what you have to do is to try and align the end of the segment with the existing part of the track you already have built. And there's a trick to that. You could go obviously side to side, but that's very inaccurate because the keys are not too sensitive, and you can't really go by very small increments. You always overshoot a little bit to a side. So the best way to do is you don't go side to side. You go forward and back at an angle. That way you can make very slight changes, and eventually you'll be able to align like so the segment with your track. Another thing is the vertical alignment, which I have just got right now. As you can see, you need to place a track at a height at which, due to the oscillation of your avatar in the air, who always keeps going up and down a little bit, which causes the new segment to periodically shine through the existing track and then disappear again, like you can see right here. That means you're pretty much exactly at the height you need to be. And then go slightly forward, wait until it gets yellow, and place the segment. Now you can see I've already removed some ground here in order to save some time. And the segment is being printed. Now, you may ask, why don't I make the segments longer? Why? Because now obviously I'll have to add more blocks, or I will have the pylons very close to one to another, which for reasons I'll mention later isn't ideal either. And the reason is because, especially when you're over water, there's tons of plants and stones and other stuff that may obstruct the placing of the segment, and sometimes they are very well hidden, so that it can take up to hours. It actually happened to me that it took me an hour before I could place a segment, before you can find those. So now that you've done that, you'll start placing empty cube blocks onto the segment, and you can see I just ran out of material, and that's actually on purpose, because due to the physics bug I spoke about earlier, you don't want to get too far from your train, or you just might lose, whatever progress you made since the last save, because the train going haywire unrecoverably. So the best strategy here is not to take the supplies with you, but actually leave them in the train, which is obviously fitted with tons of item dispensers. To leave the supplies in the train, and that way it will always stop you from or prevent you from getting any further by means of you running out of material. Although you still could go maybe twice as far as we got here before you would get out of physics range, maybe 3 times even. But that can happen fairly easily if you're building this quickly. So it does take a little more time, but still I really would advise to follow this procedure, because there's nothing worse than forgetting to save. And obviously I have, well, even half an hour of lost gameplay can be very annoying if you're building a track, because sometimes it's very tedious work and it's not really that much fun. So this is about exactly the distance you want to build, or the length of a track you want to build between two pylons. In general, the rule would be so that the entire train will fit between two pylons, which will result in less strain on the joints when you're in a turn. Turns obviously have to be very slight, unless you want to have accidents. Now, you can make sharper turns, but it's very tricky and takes experience. Also, you have to drive slower in them. And in general, if you just plan ahead, if you do your planning well, you don't really need sharp turns. And it's the same with real trains. If you look at any rail track, you won't find any very sharp turns. So you can see I've actually built the track a little longer than this train. That's the reason is that the longest train I have has 7 cars, and this train only has 5 cars. So if you're using the 5-car train, and you maybe later want to use the 7-car train, leave some room for 2 more cars. But if you're building a straight track, it doesn't really matter the distance between the pylons, even though every single pylon is a potential, even though very small, but it is a risk of causing a derailment on that side of the train when those wheels bump over this white, I don't know what to call it, or this white part of the pylon. Sometimes they get stuck and it can cause a derailment, although that's a very rare occurrence for those multi-car trains. They actually work better than single-car trains, because the other cars will somewhat dampen the shock caused by that wheel bumping over the pylon. Now that we've built a straight segment, let's build another one. We're still gonna use a short pylon. And this time I'll show you how to build a sloped track. So, okay, yes, you can see we need to remove some of this vegetation here. So there is a way to make sloped blueprints, but I was experimenting with that. It does work, but in the end I found it doesn't really save you time, because if you just take or make a record of a sloped segment, once you print it, it will be even again. You need to actually, when you're making the blueprint, you need to have 2 pylons connected with a joint, one of the pylons will be even, the other one sloped, and that way you can ensure that one of them will be sloped when printed, but that takes up a lot of space, and as said, I didn't really have a very good experience with using that method. So, and since slopes are always kind of a custom thing, you just wanna, I think it's just easier to build them by hand. So we may probably gonna have to remove a little bit of earth here too. Now, as you can see, there isn't much space between the roof of the train and the wheels, so the increase of a slope cannot be very sharp, or the angle of the sloping segment cannot be very large. Oh, and always watch out for animals. They can actually cause a derailment if they bump into your train. So, and since near pylons, as you can see, the track is the width of or the depth of the track is somewhat or is 2 blocks. Therefore, if you'd start the sloping track too close to a pylon, this wider part could get stuck between the roof and the wheels, and you would get stuck. So this is about the distance you need to have between the last pylon and wherever you're gonna place your joint. Now let's see, 7. So you place the joint like this. Add a few blocks here. While I'm building up, you'll see right away. So now let's move the center of gravity behind the joint so I can unlock it. So now this isn't going to be the angle we're gonna be building the segment, but it'll allow me to drop the segment into position once I've built the support, which I'm doing now. So if you wanna get across a larger ridge, and I always recommend, if at all possible, to go over obstacles rather than through them, because building tunnels is literally the most boring thing you can imagine. and the pun is intentional. But it takes immense amounts of time, and it just isn't fun. I'll try and show you. Okay, I have to get out of here before that cow causes a derailment. So for this part, I'll have to take some supplies with me because I don't want to risk the animals derailing my train. Now, so as said, you want to avoid building tunnels, even though they're impressive if you have them, and I do have quite a few, but you'll see if you try to build them, it's pretty much the most time-intensive activity you can imagine. Removing ground it's just boring. So if you want to go across larger ridges or hills, you wanna repeat this process, which I'm showing you here right now, several times. You won't just have one angled segment, or like you won't increase the angle just once, but multiple times, and that way you'll build a slight curve, and you can increase the slope of the segment to a fairly how do you call that? To a good angle, the angle of the resulting slope could be as large as this one, and the train will have no problem climbing. Steep was the word I was looking for. Obviously, I'm not a native speaker, so the resulting angle can be quite steep, and the trains have no problems handling those. The only limiting factor is each increment of increasing the angle, because if you have this incremental angle, if this incremental angle is too sharp, you'll just get stuck. So now we have built and dropped the segment. You can see it's a very slight increase. This is about the optimal increment you can build. So you have, I mean, 10, 20, 10, 20, 25 blocks maybe length of the support. Before you remove the support, you should build the next pylon, because if you remove it earlier, the weight of the pylon might change the angle of even though the joint is locked, the weight of the pylon could change the angle of the track, and since we're satisfied with this angle, we don't want to do that. So now the standard way I've been building this, and there's no particular reason, probably there's maybe even better ways to do that, but I just want the whole world to have a unified look. Therefore, the standard way how I'm building those segments is always 8 cubic blocks ending in 2 sloped segments, and in the middle of those 8, so that means the middle 4 blocks, you have this support, and the support is 4 sloped blocks ending in this, what you call this shape. Just watch what I'm doing and you'll know. Just like any other track segment, then you add them on the other side. You can see the segments moving a little bit. If we hadn't left the support in place, we might have an issue with angle declining, and yeah, then you place one block between those, like as you well, just the blocks are difficult to describe in words, so just watch closely what I'm doing, or you can obviously you can build pylons of your own design. So now, since we're anchored in the ground, it's safe to remove the support, and we can build the rest of these here. The reason why there's 2 more blocks extending over the end of the support is because this design slightly decreases the chance of derailment, because if there's a bump, you might get stuck, but the roof of the train will stop it from the side wheels getting over or under the track. Ideally, it doesn't work always, but it's sort of works. So okay, so we're removing the support. Get some plating. All those cars are interconnected with conveyor connectors. This train has maybe 300 containers, so that's why it's taking quite some time before I can access the contents. Hopefully this will be a thing the developers one day improve. I don't really see a reason why it should take so long. Isn't like seriously, like this would greatly improve the gameplay. Or whatever, I can, like, a good trick to reduce the times waiting. You can see, even if when leaving the containers, you have to. There's quite some lag, but an easy trick to cut this time in half when you're collecting materials and putting them into into your conveyor system or into your container system, don't access the containers, but just access something like this FAD machine or a 3D printer, and then just double click place the items there, and you can see accessing the FAD machine or 3D printer is immediate. You can't see the containers from there, but if you just want to dump stuff into your container system, you won't have to wait for all those containers to load. So that's maybe pretty obvious, but took me some time before I noticed or before I realized I could do that. So let's see how much ground we'll have to remove. Yeah, we'll have to remove some ground. Oh shit, almost derailed. But no, it's fine. We're fine. Okay. So we got the plating, so let's finish that pylon. So I always do the white and yellow combination. Just to give it all a unified look, obviously. With the exception of switches, which use the combination of black and white. Okay, now we'll have to remove some ground here. We have to be careful not to remove too much ground under the pylon, so it would drop. Normally I take great care in shaping the ground neatly with a left mouse button earth removal. But I don't want to waste too much time here, so the edges will be a little rougher than usual here. Okay, how far are we? Okay, this is about as far as you can go from the train without risking catastrophe. So still smoothen the edges a little bit here, and then drive forward with the train, and let's just hope those stupid cows won't bump into the train. Just to be sure, I'll make a save. Let's call it 1. Sorry for that, but I wouldn't want to have to build all of that again. Okay. Let's go. You can see this train is a little laggy. It's an older model. Shouldn't happen with the models I'll be releasing in the workshop. But it was just too inconvenient to build another one because I'd have to fill it with supplies, and this one was already filled with supplies. I'll show you later how to build one, and that one shouldn't be too laggy. But this will have to do for now. You know, for the purposes of the instruction video, it doesn't really make much of a difference. Okay, remove some ground here. So the edges are quite rough here. Normally I would try and make them smoother and nicer, but it doesn't really matter here. So add a few more blocks here. Now, the next thing we're gonna do is try to build a curved segment. For this purpose, or like if whenever you're building a track. Shit, I have a phone call. Okay, and I'm back. So that's great. Now I'll have to edit the video. But yeah, what can you do? As you can see, I'm not very used to making YouTube videos. Should have turned the phone on, off, but well, it was a call I had to take, so. And I'm suspecting this video is going to be the length of this video. Sooner or later, I'm gonna have to go to take a leak, so I'd have to edit it anyway, probably. Right, so we have this slope segment. Now, if I wanted to increase the slope, I would place another joint here and repeat the procedure as was the first one, again incrementally increasing the angle by maybe 1 or 2 degrees. But instead of doing that, I'll place another straight segment to even the slope out. Thing is with wait, I'll show you something else before I do that. Thing is with those slopes, once you've if you have multiple stages, if you increase the slope multiple times, then you can't just place a straight or a level segment after that. You also have to incrementally decrease the angle or the steepness of the track, and that's fairly similar to what I've shown you. Even though we don't have to need it and don't have to do it here, since we only have one increment. I'll show you how that's done, and then I'll remove it again. So, like the first time you build the segment which you're gonna be changing the angle of. But since we're trying to move it down here, we don't have to build a counterweight to move it. We can build it right away, and then again you build a support like this. And since the support is also, or the blocks are higher and higher, eventually they'll, if I continue like this, eventually the upper edge of this cube will reach the level of the upper edge of wherever the joint is. Then you'd have a level segment, but sometimes you have to go higher than that. In any case, you just build the length necessary and unlock, and here you go. You have an almost level segment here. And then again by hand you place another pylon and so on until you're level. Okay, so we're gonna remove that now because it's okay. Wait, can't do that because we'll be building here, so I have to remove all of this stuff, or it'll obstruct our blueprints. So you can see building slopes takes a lot of time, so that's also why I don't do them much. And most of the time The tracks are nice and level. That's another thing you have to consider when you're planning your track. Always before building it, take a helo and fly through the entire length of your intended track. Another useful tool is to place this custom marker at the spot towards which you want to build, so you can see it in the compass, and that helps you to maintain the direction you're aiming at. That's essential basically for building tracks which aren't just zigzagging chaotically. Now let's place the small straight segment which we'll use to connect to a switch. So again, we are fairly close to the ground, so right-handed short pylon will suffice. Build. Some of the higher segments are so high they wouldn't look very feasibly if you would build them on the ground, but their purpose is to be built in water because the ocean can be sometimes very deep. Okay, since the previous segment is sloped, this time I'll have to align the new one so that the oscillating effect only affects really the edge of the previous segment in order to avoid having a bump there. So this looks fairly good. We're probably gonna have to remove some ground again. So while we're waiting for the segment to print, I can show you some of the other segments. And I'll show you the highest one, which is XL. You can see it's really high. So normally if you put this on the ground and drive this high over the ground, it just looks unrealistic. But if you put it in the ocean, it can look just like a short pylon, but under the water it can go fairly deep. And you place it exactly the same way like you would with the short one, so therefore that's why I won't show you the placement of the large ones. Sometimes when you're in really deep waters, it can become very complicated to build a track because going down horizontally takes you so far away from the train when you're clearing the bottom of the sea from vegetation and stones that you get out of physics range and your train derails. And there is a limit to, like, at some point you would have to always anchor the train before you can build, at which point, oh yeah, there's basically a limit to the depth of the sea where you can still build a track. It can be overcome, but it's extremely time consuming, so it's best to avoid very deep seas. Or maybe instead of coming with a multiple car train there, you come with a single car train or with a helo, and that way you avoid catastrophe. But obviously the multiple car train has a great advantage of its huge storage capacity, so that's why I like to use them for building tracks, because it takes a really long time before you deplete its capacity. So again, there's the lag. That's just a flaw of this earlier model of the train. None of the trains I'll be sharing should suffer from this, or if they do, it should be at least it should be much less pronounced. The cause of this is, you can see there's the conveyor connecting one car to another, and at one side, if you look here, it looks like here from the inside. And here it's done correctly, but in other parts of the train, the distance between the conveyor connectors sometimes can become too large and they disconnect, and that causes the lag. Newer versions of the train shouldn't suffer from that. Also, uh, the lag can be greatly diminished by setting up the wheels correctly. On the front and rear car, all the side wheels should be turned off, which they are. If you turn on these wheels, the issue becomes much more severe. So we'll build straight ahead for a little bit more, because we need to get to that clearing over there to place the 7-track switch. And maybe I'll do a little turn here. So as said, normally the distance between pylons would be the length of the train, but in this case I won't really be using this track. As said, this is an old save game, therefore I can violate my own rule and start with a turn right away. Normally I wouldn't do that. Okay, we'll use the short pylon again, right-handed. Build. So, as with the slopes, with the turns, you should always also keep the angle as small as possible. I'd say 2 degrees is pretty much the maximum. Although, as mentioned earlier, you can make sharper angles, but it takes practice. Also, you need to keep that in mind once you're driving through those tighter turns. Now this is pretty much the maximum of what you should use. So the turns are very gradual, very smooth, which ensures that you always stay on track. And it's gotten dark, so maybe we'll take a nap so we can see better. I wish the night-day cycle could be longer.
You are in a well-fed state.
For some reason, all games I don't know any game which has a realistic night and day cycle. And you could argue, well, if it had, then the nights would be extremely long, and that would be a pain in the ass. But to that, I'd say if you have the option to sleep through the night and you know, reduce it to a few seconds, then that's not really a problem. But somehow all developers, and this isn't just Planet Nomads, it's basically any game I know, somehow they just feel they have to make those ridiculously short days, probably thinking it increases immersion, but for me it does the opposite. It makes me think like this planet is rotating really, really fast around its axis. And in this case of Planet Nomads, that very well could be the case. The planet is tiny, it only has a couple dozen miles in diameter, so, or maybe even just 1 dozen, so it's tiny. Don't know really how the gravity could work on such a tiny planet. Maybe it has a small black hole in its core. Anyway, that I went off on a tangent there a little bit. So the ground should be ready here. Let's extend this one then. And we're getting to clear ground. Now, next we'll be building the 7-track switch. And the 7-track switch is basically a small railroad of its own. It's a track segment that drives on 2 large rails, side to side. Between 7 different tracks. Oh shit. Almost got off track here. The lag's really bad now, I don't know why. Okay. And in order for that to work properly, or to avoid bugs inherent to this game, make sure that the mobile part of the switch, which you'll see right away, never is placed below ground, or even if you've excavated the rock from wherever you're placing it. Doesn't matter if there used to be rock or soil. It'll probably cause the moving part of the switch to get stuck permanently. Okay, here it is. So you can see there are those 2 black parallel rails on which the rail segment moves, and then there's those movable blocks which will fix it in a position of another track. And we're clear of ground here, but here we wouldn't still, you can see the wheels down there, that's where the moving part is. So as you can see, if I placed it here now, we still wouldn't be clear of the ground, so we'll have to build a little further. Now normally I would build this switch over flat ground, not in a place like this, because this place would require a lot of additions to the switch to make all the supports reach the ground for it in order for it to look nice. But to demonstrate functionality, I don't need that, so I'll build it in this slope, and it will have the added benefit of showing how the whole thing is constructed. Now, placing this one is a little trickier because we can't really get a good view of the track aligning. It's guesswork, but there's some tolerance. Even if there's a little bump, it's not such a big deal. Also, you have to keep in mind when separating the moving part of the switch, it'll drop a tiny little bit. And we can see that we have some obstacle in the ground there, which prevents us from placing the switch. So I cleared this area before, but originally I intended I thought I would be building it somewhere over here. So we still need to we need to clear the seafloor a little bit, which will take us further away from the train, which might cause the going haywire bug I was mentioning earlier. So that's why I will make a save game here, just in case. Whenever you're using multi-car trains, it's never a bad idea to save your game. Only take ages in my world. Takes ages. Okay. So you leave the train like that, and maybe I'll be able to show you what I mean by the train going haywire. So, this is probably the most boring part of building railway tracks, finding every single piece of vegetation and stone that obstructs your blueprint. This is another thing that might be easily fixed by the developers. Just, make those things either go away when you build the blueprint or just remain there and not be in the way or like merge. Why do I have to remove every tiny little pebble that's inside the cube of the blueprint, even if it's not colliding with any part of the actual structure I'm building? Sometimes in this seagrass there will be a very little, like 2-inch large stone pebble which is invisible, and you can really spend hours looking for it. One trick I use is in such cases is selecting the large base platform and comb the ground like this, and if I see the the borders of the platform going red, that means I've hit something. Sometimes you'll also encounter stones being underground, or if you remove the large stones or rocks, sometimes a part of them stays underground and then they're really invisible, and then really the only way to find them is the way I showed you with a platform. Now let's see. Let's try it again, and we'll probably face the same issue. So as you can see, this is the reason why the track segment blueprints are so short. Exactly for the reason of this issue. So now,
My sensors show you are slightly thirsty.
am I? So there's probably, okay. Sideways doesn't help. Yeah, there's probably multiple ones. seems maybe even this tree might be in the way. Let's remove all of that. What a pain in the ass. That would be so much easier if you could just build over the vegetation. Oh, there's a pebble. Stones like this will prevent you from placing the blueprint. And if they're in the grass, they're basically invisible. Especially like here at the edge between the sea and the ground. Very difficult to find. Okay, let's give it a try. So that's also a thing to consider when you're planning your track and planning where the switches will be. Try to find ground that's with as little grass as possible, where it will be easy to find any possible obstructions. Okay, we're still obstructed. Okay, I'll try another thing. I'll take a different blueprint and try to comb through the ground and determine where the obstructions are. Okay, let's take the very large pylon here. It goes deep. Oh, okay, but we can't use it. Okay, I see. So okay, there's something here. Now this still might be out of the reach of the blueprint. There's something here. So a lot of stuff over there. There's something here. It seems we still have quite a lot of debris in our way. I hope I won't have to cut this out. It's taking a lot of time. At least you'll see the process. I think we're too far, but let's remove those anyway. Just for good measure. It doesn't help that now you're run out of oxygen, so you have to keep coming up and down to get air. Even with the oxygen bottles. I mean, in this distant future, I don't know what the year was in the intro. I think it was something like 2500. Why does their Scuba equipment only lasts like 30 seconds. Like if today in 2019 we have diving gear that
Caution.
allows you to
You are low
dive
on oxygen.
for uh, maybe 5 or 10 hours. I don't know. I'm not a diver, but correct me if I'm wrong. But it's definitely hours, right? So why it's impossible in this distant future to have gear like that, I don't understand. And this like the avatar is in a spacesuit, right? That should have an integrated breathing. That should have integrated breathing gear anyway. So not really like I understand they try to make the game more challenging, but this just breaks the suspension of disbelief. Same goes. Oh, here's one. The same goes for like the temperatures. Why do we have to like? Why is 35 degrees such a big problem? Why will you die unless you keep injecting yourself with some kind of chemical? Or in the cold regions, like why do you have to keep injecting yourself with stuff if you could just have warm clothes? And even with minus 60, there is like you can have warm clothes which will keep you warm for many hours in such environments. Like look at the researchers in the Arctic. They don't need, and also considering you have a reactor on your back which allows you levitating like this without limitation, this thing surely can produce enough energy for you to have a heater or an AC system in your suit that will keep the temperature optimal. I don't know. So that doesn't make sense. Come on. Yes! So this seems promising. Now, sometimes in those blueprints, there can be a gap between the edge of the structure and the edge of the blueprint itself. Might be the case here, but I'm not sure. Now, normally I would take a lot of time making sure that I'm really aligned perfectly, but again, this is just for demonstration purposes, so I won't take such great care. Okay, seems good. And print. Okay, so I'm not sure whether we got too far away from the train in order to trigger the bug, but I'll make a save game anyway. And if we did indeed get too far away, what you'll see next is the bug. But you probably won't see it. Also, in an earlier take of this video, which I had to scratch because I ran out of material, supplies. In an earlier take of this video, I was trying to demonstrate the bug and it just wouldn't happen. Normally it happens every single time if you just go far enough from the train, without exception, but this one time, like the only occasion I can ever remember ever since I've been playing this game, ever since I have multiple car trains. When I was making that video, it didn't happen. So now I did the save and let's try and drive and we'll see if it happens or not. No, it doesn't. So we probably didn't get too far away, or the game just isn't cooperating like last time. So last time I wanted to trigger the bug and it just wouldn't happen, and I don't understand why. There is another video on my channel that demonstrates this bug. It's one of the so-called bug reference videos. Not sure which one, the number, but you'll see this train in the thumbnail, so should be fairly easy to find, and it has only like 40 seconds. So there you can see it. If I won't be able to demonstrate it here, but I'll try at a later point in any case. But for now, let's just focus on building tracks. So now the very large track switch is building, sprinting, and you can see it has these trolleys down here. On them are pylons, and this whole thing moves side to side. And then there's these pads, these movable barriers, which will go up and down depending on what switches you turn on here at the control station, and those will delimit the position for the trolleys to stop where the next track will connect. As said, this switch has 7 positions, starting with this one. This is the on the right side, the rightmost position. Then you have 5 positions that are delimited by these pads, and then there's the end position over there. That's where you just hit the end of the track. I have another switch which only switches between 3 tracks, like a regular railroad switch. That means you come from one end and there's two possible ways. It's like a Y segment, and it's the one, I'll show it briefly what it looks like. That one needs a little more handwork. Where is it? Oh, it's called fork. Okay. So there's a left-handed one and a right-handed one. Unfortunately, the title is too long, so you can't really see it here in the description. Another thing that maybe could be improved. So that's what it looks like. And with this one, you need to build a pad under the moving part by hand, because I tried to make it part of the blueprint, but then there would be too much of a clearance between the trolley and the pad, and it wouldn't connect, and it just wouldn't stay in place. So I'll show you later how that's done. Now normally this close to the switch I would build another pylon right here just to make it look more realistic, but I won't bother here because it's not really essential for the thing to work. Now this 7-track switch has another interesting quirk. As you can see, it's connected, the trolley is connected to the other parts by these 4 red segments here. So you have to remove all of them in order for the trolley to be able to move. But as you'll see, once we do that, it won't actually move, it will stay fixed in its position, and the only way to get it to move is to save the game and load it again. So I'll use that opportunity to try to demonstrate to you the train going haywire bug. Okay. So just to be sure, let's make one save here in case we have to go back to where the trolley is still connected to the switch. Now there's a small deuterium generator. It should have enough fuel for some time because the consumption of this thing is really small, but just to be sure, I'll add some fuel. Okay, this takes. It's 300 small containers. Okay. Now let's see. Do we see deuterium? Oh, I thought I saw some. Did I? Was it just an illusion? I probably just imagined that. Okay, there should be some, I'm fairly sure. Train itself is nuclear powered, so we can't use the train's fuel. Oh, there was some. Another thing you have to really look out for when you're building tracks is, especially if you're building without a train, if you come with a helo or something, to always remember to check whether you're building the pylons on the correct side, because, and believe me, it happened to me. There's nothing worse than to find out after you've built like 5 miles of track that you switched the size of the pylons and the whole 5 miles are basically useless. You really don't want that to happen. So, okay, so I'll remove the connecting blocks now. And there's 2 sets of controls on this switch. I was like too lazy to figure a way. I'm pretty sure there is a way to make it so that you can use both sides independently. But the way it's set up is you can always use just one side. This one side has to be, all the switches have to be turned on if you want the controls on the other side to work. Or is it the other way around? No, oh yeah. And if you want to use that side, you have to turn all of the switches on this side on. So now you'll see how the pads operate. I turn switch on and those go up. And then when I move the trolley, it will bump into the pads with this thing here, and that will fix it in its position. Did I remove all the connecting blocks? No, I didn't. There's one more. Okay, and yeah, that was to be expected. And I'm predicting the trolley probably won't move. In order for it to move, we'll have to save the game and load it again. But I'll try and move it. Maybe we're gonna be lucky. An earlier version of this blueprint worked immediately upon printing, but no, we're stuck. So I'll save the game. And then I'll try and show you the physics bug with the train. And I wonder whether it will again not happen this time. So I'll go far away from the train. Sometimes, as mentioned earlier, it even goes haywire without you boarding it. Especially when you're coming back to it. When you're going away, it usually won't derail. Nothing will happen. Nothing should happen. So now we should. I'm fairly certain that we're far away, far enough for the bug to happen. But just to be sure, I'll go a little further. No, normally at this distance, there's no way you could come back and not have the bug happen. But as said, in the previous take of this video, the bug just wouldn't occur. And I couldn't figure out why. That never happened before, so we'll see. We can afford to derail the train now because we're gonna have to load the game anyway. So let's move. And there is a little twitching, but seems to work. Okay, this is really strange. I guess it probably has something to do with the location, because it's not that the bug that it's not that the bug is fixed, because in another save game it still happened, but due to the lag now I got delayed anyway. But this isn't the okay. I'm back on track. Okay, then I'll go to the station, because maybe it's just this place. Maybe in some locations it just doesn't happen. Could be. But that's very rare. But I'm fairly sure because earlier when I was preparing the supplies in this location, the bug always occurred once I got out of range. I also found that the bug is much more severe if you have some blocks placed under the train. So this should be fairly certain that it will happen now. Even though there is in my train museum on my world, I have two trains like these parked inside a building and they do not derail even though they're not... Okay, come on now, okay. Normally it would derail even without me boarding it when it's over this platform, but let's at least derail it by driving it. Will it derail? No. Okay, maybe it's when you're recording, it just doesn't happen. I don't know. This is totally abnormal. As said, I know that bug isn't fixed because the developers, because earlier when I was collecting the resources for this, it did happen. Okay, one last try. So this is unbelievable. Unbelievable. You wouldn't believe the number of times I had to load the game because of this bug. It happens every single time when you forget to save and load the game once you get back in range of the train. Every single time. Only when I'm recording and trying to show you this bug, it doesn't happen. And I really can't explain why. But let's go really far away this time. Like normally, the distance to trigger this isn't really large. It's really maybe 100 meters. But, okay. Like this is at least 3 times as far as you really would need to go in order for it to happen. And I really want to make sure it will happen this time. And before this video, in this particular spot over that platform, the train always derailed even without me boarding it when I came back to it like this. So I always had to anchor it to the ground. Doesn't seem to be happening now. There is a little bit. Ah, here it goes. You see? It's twitch. It starts jumping around. Sometimes it even crashes the game. And you see it's already partially derailed. And now when I'll try and drive it, it should get even worse. Or will it? Yes. And here we go. It's getting worse and worse. At some point it will totally wrap around the rail and even crash the game. So this is what I spoke about. Now we'll load the game in order to get the switch working. And I'll take a short break since I'm editing the video anyway. So here we go. So I'm back and you can see the trolley is indeed moving right now, but we have another problem. I didn't notice the other end hasn't connected to the ground, so it fell off. So it's a good thing we made that save. We made that save game before I detached the platforms and the track. So we'll load that again, then we'll have to connect it to the ground, then remove the fastening straps, then save again, load again, and then we'll have a functioning, or we should have a functioning switch. So it's quite a tedious process, but it's still much easier than building the switch by hand from scratch. Now, since we're loading, with this twitch bug I showed you earlier, this usually only affects multiple car trains. Uh, it probably has to do with the joints that are connecting them, but very rarely it can even happen to single car trains, in which case, once it happens once to a particular train, it will never really work again. It will be twitchy all the time, even if you save load, regardless whether you're close to the train or far to the train. The bug will even transfer into a blueprint. And I actually had posted a blueprint of the T3, which is one of the early trains I built. And it was, the blueprint was made with this twitch in the train, so if you built it, it would be very prone to derailments. It would derail all the time, and I noticed it like after several months after I've placed it there. The current version that's shared on my workshop should be working just fine. I removed the bug by, like, the only way to get rid of the bug in a single car train is to delete all the suspensions and wheels and rebuild them again. Okay, so hopefully I connected both of the platforms to the bottom of the sea. Now I'll remove the straps. So if it happens to you in a single car train, just load a previous save game before it started occurring, or you can just scrap the train because it won't work ever again unless you rebuild the wheels. But that's I won't be showing in this video how to build a train because that's fairly complicated, and maybe if this video gets enough views, maybe I'll do another one on how to build your own train. Here I'll focus on just how to build my trains from blueprints. Okay, again the trolley isn't working, so we'll save the game. Save, yes. And we'll load the game again. In general, if you're encountering strange behavior in any of your builds, unless it's gotten to the stage where parts of joints and wheels are flying around in the air, at which point nothing can save the thing. If you see that maybe a twitch in your vehicle is developing, or machine or whatever, before it starts disintegrating, just save the game as quickly as possible and then load it again, and hopefully the twitch will be gone. In general, I found that all of these bugs are connected to joints, hinges, and wheels and suspensions. That means all the flexible parts there are. Suspensions and wheels are a little less susceptible to it than joints and hinges, but they can cause this too. And even actually even air blades, because they basically any part that has moving parts. But with air blades, it's very rare. Um, and it has to do with the physics, and I don't really like that. I actually got some feedback on this from the developers, and back then they said this is the mechanics of those joints and hinges are built in Unity, so hopefully, if that's true, hopefully another version of Unity will fix this. We'll see. And now you can see the trolley is moving as intended, and it will stop at the risen pad. And I can drop the pads again and raise the last one. And I'll stop here. And obviously the next step would be, or will be, because we'll be building here, to place a new pylon here, and you can start with another track. And since the trolley will always stop in the same position, it ensures that it will connect to the track. Fairly simple design, but very effective. And this is the left side most extreme position. So that's how this thing works. Now, if you have a train loaded on the trolley, on the track, which I'll show you right now, as you can see, the thing is fairly high and the train is very heavy, so it will be very top heavy. And due to the wheel mechanics I used in this, it's fairly easy for the trolley to topple over. So the best way to move it with a train loaded on it is by tapping the W or S key just very briefly, in short intervals, or you're gonna have a crash. So that would look like this. You can maybe hear the keys. See, now I pressed it for too long and I almost crashed the trolley, so I have to do very short taps and move it like this. And the train starts swinging a little bit, but once you get the hang of it, it's fairly easy to operate. But, you know, just in case, it's always better to make a safe game before you start switching tracks. So that's the 7-track switch. You can build 7 tracks on each side connecting, which in theory gives you from one single track on which you have arrived 13 other tracks which you can on which you can continue. 13 new directions to go in. But as for me, I usually use this design, or this design for train hubs where I park my other trains and only use 1 or 2 of the tracks for actual. Oh, now what happened? Did we get out of range? Down. Okay. There is a design flaw in this apparently. So one of the switches seems to disconnect just short of the. Okay, I'll fix this for the workshop release. I know what causes this. I just thought I had fixed it before, so we'll use the one before that. So you won't have this issue once you download this blueprint. It will be fixed. Now that we are in position, there's no need anymore for the pads to stay risen. That will save fuel in the deuterium generator. And let's build a straight segment back in that direction. Now we'll need a slightly higher one. This would be maybe a medium, maybe even a large one. And since we're going backwards, we'll need a left-handed one. And so the left-handed ones don't really differ from the right-handed ones, except for that the longer part of the track will be facing away from you if you pick the one with the side you have your pylons on. Not sure how to explain this, but I think you catch my drift. Okay. Sometimes if you just can't align vertically, you need to go up and down a little bit, and then again with the mouse try and find the sweet spot. But even this probably would be fine, but I'm just sort of OCD about this. Okay, won't waste any more time. This should be fine. Okay. So as you can see, track will align perfectly. The raising pads will assure that whenever you want to switch to this track, the trolley will stop exactly in this position, and you will be able to drive onto the track. Almost finished. No, the other direction. Okay. Now that that's done, we'll try and build the fork switch. But it's getting dark again, so we'll take a nap first. Where is the pod? Here it is. Okay. Rise and shine. Here we go. So now for the fork switch. Now we'll need a left-handed one now. If you need to check the side, just open the edit window, although I'm not sure if that's gonna work for the Steam ones. Probably not. So you might need to make your own copy of the blueprint, like make a snapshot of it and add it into your non-Steam blueprints. As you can see, there's no description here yet, but it should be there once this video along with the blueprints are shared. So let's build that. And yeah, we'll have to remove some more vegetation here. And I'll put it, okay, it seems it's going to be underground, and that's bad. We need it we need it to be clear of the ground because, okay, how will I show you this? Okay, never mind. I'll just show you how this switch is built, and I'll just won't be able to show you how to drive on it. Oh, wait. Try and figure something out. So where would I put it? Okay, I know. Let's go back on the switch. You know, you could excavate the ground to make place for the switch, but as explained earlier, this can result, even if there's no remnants of the ground or of the rock that was there, this can result in the switch becoming being blocked, immovable, regardless of what you do. No way to fix that. So any movable part of the blueprint you're about to print, absolutely have to be above ground and in a place which always had been
Good
above
hydration
ground.
secured.
So even if you remove the ground beforehand and then
You are
place
in
the
the well fed
blueprint,
state.
you'll have the same issue. And that took me quite a lot of time before I figured that one out. And it was quite frustrating because I was looking for, because I thought I'm being blocked by a piece of ground that stayed in the way. So I'm not sure if we're clear of the ground here. I'll try it. I'll make a very sharp turn here to for, to have a better chance of not overlapping with the ground, but as said, turns like this, you shouldn't really make turns this sharp. Okay, kind of get it aligned. Oh, let's make it just like this. And hopefully we're clear of the ground. Yes! So that looks good. Now I'm not sure. Maybe we've gotten too far from the train, so I'll make once the blueprint is printed, I'll make a save game. And like the other switch, this one too, I think needs to be loaded again before it starts working, but I'm not sure. pylons are on the correct side. That's always good, because if they aren't, they'll hit these struts on the right side of the train here. And it's quite an unpleasant surprise if you've built like several miles of worth of track, and then suddenly you find out that it was all for nothing. Okay. There are even simpler switch designs than this one for single car trains, but those are best built by hands and now also obsolete, because since the power joints, it's fairly easy to build those, and I think probably you won't have to have problems constructing them on your own. It's you just use a straight segment, put a joint on it, connect it to some power source, and even the train's power source, because you'll always, when you need to switch a switch, then you'll always have a train around. So you just connect the power of the train to the joint and place a control station onto the pylon, and you can move the track around into position. So that's fairly easy. You really don't need a blueprint for that, although I'll probably make one at some point. But since I use multiple car trains, okay, looks good. Since I use multiple car trains, I can't really use that type of design, and the reason is the multiple car train is heavy, and if you drive it over a switch like this, which wouldn't be supported on the other side, it would just glitch and it would derail the train. So you need to have a support on the other hand of the moving track. So now when you've printed this blueprint, it will look like this, and the joint over there is locked, and that should remain that way for the time being. Now the first thing you need to do, or is it already done? Yeah, if you look at these, it is done. If you look at these suspensions, they're all unfinished. So you'll need some composite parts to finish them, but you don't want to finish them just yet. The reason why they're unfinished is so that you can place some platforms under them. Originally, I was planning on making this the platform part of the blueprint, but then it would have to be at least a block away from the lower edge of this moving part of this trolley, and that was too much. The wheels then wouldn't have enough contact with a platform, which would then again lead to the platform not staying in place once it reaches the desired position. So and the best way to build this kind of switch, again remembering that that we need the turns to be as slight as possible, not as sharp as the one over there, even though that's still acceptable, but can be dangerous in some situations. You don't wanna, the tracks this switch will be connecting to, you shouldn't have one straight, for instance, and one at an angle, but have two at shallower angles, like one here and one here. Maybe you could if you strain it to the extreme, maybe you could make the switch serve 3 tracks, but the problem is you always have to have clearance from the pylons of the neighboring track. If you build them too close together, the train will just collide with the pylons of the neighboring track. So that's why. So normally I would make these platforms nicer. I would put some, some pillars under them to make it look more realistic. But I won't bother with that now. Maybe this is overlapping too much. I didn't align this one very well, but doesn't really matter. Just to demonstrate how the thing works. So the platform shouldn't be much longer than the trolley itself, because as said, we'll be only operating 2 tracks, or serving 2 tracks, switching between 2 tracks. So we don't need much of an angle. Now once the platform is finished, we need to finish the suspensions, which can be difficult because the fairing is obstructing them. Worst case scenario, you need to remove the fairing, then complete the suspensions, and then put the fairing back there again. Or you don't even have to have the fairing there, but I just thought it looks nicer if the wheels aren't visible. So we'll need some composite parts, waiting for them to load. Here we are. Okay. So building this switch definitely also takes a lot of time, but it's not as resource intensive as the other one. What are we missing? Oh, we still need some mechanical parts. Seems some of the suspensions are more unfinished than others. Still need composites and mechanical parts. And again, as said, it takes a lot of time to build this switch, but the blueprint still will save you quite a bit of time compared to when you'd be building it by hand. Unfortunately, there just is no way how to incorporate the platform into the blueprint. You could have the platform as a separate blueprint, I guess. But you'll also find, like, whenever I'm building this, the terrain is a little bit different, so I end up with building slightly different platforms every single time, so I guess when you build one, you can make a blueprint of that if you want to use it, but usually I just build it by hand like this. Well, usually I actually, in my active world, I only have one or two of these operating right now. So there are not so many, but I've built several more preparing for this video. So put the fairing back in place. Theoretically now the whole thing should be operational except for the locked joint. Don't forget about that. Absolutely need to unlock the joint or it won't work. But it probably won't work anyway, and we will have to load and save again. Now this still isn't finished because... Okay, can we move? Yes, we can move. So it works already, so that's good. We won't have to load. But obviously in this, if you build in this state, it wouldn't be so, or the positions of the tracks will be connecting to aren't fixed. So a good thing to do is to build like, what would you call these? Well, some pads for the trolley to bump into, which will delimit the extreme position of the switch. So now you have to. So you just need to repeat what you've seen here. Now add a few blocks here. Obviously you could make these look nicer. I usually do. I give them a sort of rubbery look with rounded edges and stuff that are really unnecessary, but it looks nice. But just so I don't make the video too long, it is probably already very long. But in order not to make it even longer, I'll just make simple ones like these. And these will define the extreme positions of the switch. So now you have to detach it from the trolley again so that it's not fixed to the ground. Move back a little bit. This one's solar powered, so you have to worry about fuel. Add a few more blocks here. The reason why I don't attach those pads to the platform itself is that because I want the pads to be exactly parallel to the side of the trolley when it touches them, which will provide the safest well, which is the safest way to do it if you don't want to experience glitching. Now that looks good. All that remains to be done is to remove the vegetation so we have room for the connecting tracks. Then we'll test the thing, and then we're almost done. All that will remain to be demonstrated or to be shown is how to build tunnels and how to build trains. Oh, we could do that right now. I'll actually build another train instead of a straight segment right here. That will save us some time. Oh, we're out of batteries. Battery power. Okay. So we got fairly far from the train. At this distance, it is very likely it will glitch. So before boarding it and driving it, did you see that twitch? It started moving a little bit. That means it's probably glitching already. So just to be safe, I'll make a save game. As said, whenever you see your vehicle or your machine twitching like that, it's always a good idea to make a save, to save the game, because and not only save the game, but save it in close proximity to whatever was twitching, because if you load that save game, the twitch will be gone. But I won't be loading right now because I don't want to drive the train yet. I want to build another train, and hopefully we have enough resources. So we'll be building the T64D. Where is it? Which is one of the two 7-car designs. So the train we were driving up till now was the T84C, which is the shorter version of the T84D. And likewise, the T64 has a 7 and a 5-car version, and the 7-car version is always D, and the 5-car is C. C stands for climate control, because earlier versions didn't have climate control, because there was no climate control back then. I mean, I at least think the train we were driving up till now was the 84C, or maybe its prototype. Haven't really looked, because from the outside it looks exactly the same as the earlier versions. The difference is the arrangement of the containers and the climate control. And I also think the C maybe has 2 3D printers more than the earlier versions, and better connecting conveyor connectors. Okay. Are we aligned? Come on. Oh, we're probably gonna have to, no, we're clear. There's no vegetation in our way. That's unusual. It's lucky. Yeah, this should be fine. And it's building. Now, we'll need some more of that fuel. I'm not sure if when I get away from where is the fuel? Oh, I loaded the game, so it actually never left the other train. I don't know if the haywire train glitch will be triggered if I get out of its physics range while it's still printing. Never really tested that. But just to be on the safe side, before we drive it, we should make a save game, and if it glitches, we'll be able to load. Now, having multiple trains in a location like we are having now has its own, like, obviously due to the glitch, it can cause some issues because it's very easy then to get too far from one of the trains and it will glitch. So normally the train I'm not using, I would anchor to the ground. But if we glitch out here, I basically already showed you how to build everything, so even if the train glitches, it doesn't really matter. But normally when I go over to that train, I would anchor this one to the ground. And D64 is building. And as with all these designs, a train before it's built from a blueprint, it has to be connected to the track by one of those red straps. You can already see it here. This is probably the best train design I've made. Really the only downside is the number of small containers, which causes the long lag when you open them. But as said, hopefully that will be fixed someday. And even then, I don't really need to access them that often. If I dump stuff in, I dump it into the FAD machine or one of the other utilities, and I give orders to the printers. That doesn't cause the lag either, and then I print blueprints, and that doesn't cause much of a lag either, or it does cause a lag, but it's independent of the number of containers. It's rather dependent on the number of blueprints you have stored. So even though there's quite a significant lag for this huge amount, I think this train has like something like 302 containers. So even for that amount of containers, even though the lag is very long, it doesn't bother me much because I rarely ever access them. There's just no need. Oh, did the train glitch? It looks like it. Yes. The other train glitched. See? It's already derailed. So that's what I was talking about. So this can get progressively worse and worse if unattended. So like normally I would load the game, but if I don't want the game to crash and I still want to continue with the other train over there, the only thing you can do now is to delete the joints. That will prevent the worst from happening. Okay, the other blueprint finished printing apparently. Or did we glitch? No, the other blueprint is finished. Okay. And we have a serious glitch here. I can't even remove some of the hinges. Don't seem to be, like, you can't actually hit them with the multi-tool. So detached like this, we should be rid of the worst of the glitching. But this train is useless now, as you can see. So the other train's printed, and we were definitely too far from it now, so if we want to drive it, we'll have to save and load the game again. But we can remove the strap now. And I did it the wrong way around. You should start here actually. on the lower side, remove the lower blocks, and then work your way back to the upper side. So now the train is released from the rail and fully operational, except for that we need to save the game and load again, unless we want to glitch it out too. Okay, there's fuel, let's get into the cockpit and save the game. And I guess while the game, since we'll be loading the game anyway, I'll start the game anew, or I'll exit the game to Windows and restart it to get rid of some of the lag that's been building up for the last couple of hours. Okay, we're back. And we loaded the game, so it should be safe now to start driving around with a new train. And it works nicely. But the old glitched out train is in the way, so I'll just get rid of it. Could be a problem. I guess that would take too long, so well, you see how this works, I guess. So build a platform less than a block away from the lower side of the switch trolley, then complete or finish the suspensions of the wheels, then move it to one side, build a pad on one side, then move it to the other side, build a pad on the other side, and then place new tracks at each extreme position of the switch rail. So here we did it only for one side. I guess I could. So that's T6040. Nice, isn't it? You may know it from my intercontinental railroad or railway video. No. So now I would just move the track to the other position, switch, and place another segment here. And as you can see, it looks like the track would lead fairly close to this pylon here. I think we would be just able to clear it with a train, but we could also, put it at a slight angle to that direction in order to increase the distance here. But it's fairly close, a little too close for comfort. So you'll have to keep that in mind always when you're using this switch. As you can see, the angle here is just about right. So definitely. Like it's fine for 2 tracks, for switching between 2 tracks, but for 3 tracks, I think this probably wouldn't work unless you would use it for single car trains. But then again, if you do that, you don't really need this type of switch. You can just build a straight segment with a joint and power it from the train and place a control station there, and that's that. So that's how you build. Switches and trains. Fairly simple. Remember about the glitch. Let's drive this train into into the ground. It isn't even possible. It'll stay stuck like this. So the next and last thing is how you build a tunnel, and for that we'll have to move to a different location. And I'm back for the last part of the video, which is digging tunnels. Now, it's a pretty straightforward thing. You basically just dig a hole ahead of you and then build a track through it. But this can be very tedious, and there are a few tips I can give you that will make this process a little shorter. Now, the best way to do that, to dig a tunnel, is to use the T8 mole, which is this train specifically designed for digging tunnels. But since it's not really polished yet, this design, I'll be releasing it a little bit later. So until then, you'll have to do, well, you'll either have to build a train of your own, which will fulfill the same purpose, or just use a beacon. Just, bring the materials for building a beacon with you, and that's all you really need for digging a good tunnel. Now, starting a tunnel is pretty easy. You just place a track, build a track so it goes into the ground. I like to always have a pylon right at the entrance of a tunnel because it looks better. So extend this segment a little bit, and we'll build a small pylon with a track. Right-handed. Okay, here we go. Okay, so we get some kind of cows here again. Now those especially at tunnel entrances, animals can be an issue. They'll get stuck in the uneven surface of the tunnel, and if they collide with your train, they can easily make it derail, regardless of how heavy the train is and how light the animal is. They're incredibly strong and powerful, so always watch out for those. And worst case, sometimes you just have to kill them, or if issues keep reoccurring, remove their nest and load the place again, and they should be gone. I don't like killing them directly, so usually I just destroy their nest and then load the game without the nest, and they're gone without the need to kill them. Okay, here we go. So, before I started using the method which I'm about to show you, I used to just dig ahead of me when I started a tunnel, and but the problem with that was if you levitate and dig ahead of you, your altitude remains constant. That means the tunnel you'll be digging will actually be curved parallel to the surface of the planet. And since the planet is very small, this will result eventually in your tunnel relative to the track sloping downwards. And you'll end up with a tunnel that's unnecessarily deep. Or it won't be a nice tunnel that's cut exactly around where the train will go, but it will be uneven, and you'll spend a lot more time digging ground which doesn't need to be dug, wasting even more time. Like, digging tunnels is time consuming as it is, so you wanna really save as much time as possible doing this. And I can't stress enough how important it is to plan your track well and to avoid tunnels as much as possible. And if you have to dig them as short as possible, because 1,000 meters of a tunnel can easily take up several hours of your life. So just keep that in mind. Another thing about tunnels, when building them and also when driving through them, is that the polygons of the surface of the walls of the tunnels, as you move further and further away, they will get simplified, and so that therefore it isn't very advisable to leave your train inside a tunnel and move too far away from it, because the walls will become large triangles which will collide with your train and shove it off the track. Now, before I said that when you dig the tunnel like I'm digging now, just like by guessing at it, you will end up with a curved path. And in order to prevent that from happening, I built this train, which is fitted with a beacon. Now we'll start the beacon. Where is the terminal? Here. Beacon. And the beacon will nicely outline where you need to dig. And you can go fairly well. As said, if the train is already in the tunnel, you can't really go too far away from the train, or the walls of the tunnel, the polygons will simplify and they will derail it. This goes especially for multi-car trains. Those are especially susceptible to derailments in tunnels. But it happens to single car trains as well. So if you're leaving your train inside a tunnel, make sure you widen the area where it is parked. Or even better, or even simpler than that, is to anchor it to the ground. So even if the polygons simplify and cut across the train, they won't push it off the track. Yeah, well, widening the area is nonsense. The simplest way is just to anchor it to the ground. Yes. You can do that with a multi-car train too, but it will mean that you have to anchor each car individually, which again takes much more time. Now, when building the tunnel along the beam, you usually need to dig approximately 9 partial tunnels like you see here. Depends on the size of the train you're building the tunnel for, but there definitely should be some clearance. And I found it to be easiest if you just go there and back repeatedly. You just press the W key. You don't have to, think much about what you're doing. Just go here, there, and back every single time. Clear out clear out a part of the tunnel. Don't really know what else to say about that. I said boring tunnels is boring. Boring as hell. But the beam really makes it much easier to build them straight and not to stray away from the direction you want to go, saving you time. If you don't have the T8, what you do, you take the beacon and can I build on this? And you place it on the end of the track like that. I don't have the materials, but and then you connect it to the power source of the train and you'll have the same effect. But it takes a little more time because you have to dismantle it every single time when you extend the track. So it's best to use the T8. But the T8 has an obvious flaw, which is the beacon shines only in one direction. And that's, for me, that normally isn't a problem, because when I'm building a track, it's usually a very long track and it goes, I start at one end and I end at the other end. So there's one mole for one direction and there will be a mole for the other direction, a mirror version of this one. But I didn't need that one yet, so it's yet to be built, but I will release that one too. And I guess I could do a double-sided version. I have to admit this train, the one-sidedness of it is a compromise to the aesthetic. I just really like how this train looks. So I'll just have another one oriented towards the other side. So as you see, it really takes a long time to dig the tunnel. You could do it a little narrower than I'm doing it now, but then you would really have to pay attention to what you're doing. Because it's very easy to miss the mark a little bit, and then when you drive through the tunnel, you hit a wall and you derail and you have to load. Another thing with digging tunnels, which is really important, is you have to always watch out or look out for those rock remnants floating in the air, because those can be really tiny and they can cause catastrophic failures if you collide with them. You can get stuck on them, they can cause you to derail, or yeah, that's basically it. So I always check for those when I'm done with the main part of the digging, main portion, I guess. So a few more of these, I guess 3 more times, and we should be fairly ready. Also, another thing is when you're about to dig a tunnel, remember to bring enough batteries, because you'll need a lot of batteries
Extreme temperature warning.
to dig an average length tunnel. Oh, twitchy, isn't it? So I guess what we just saw is probably the manifestation of the same bug that causes the multi-car trains to go haywire. But since this is a single car train, it didn't jump off the track. It's some kind of restlessness of the suspensions. If we look at the map, this is the largest diameter for the planet, and you see we're at the end of the first section, and this is how far we went into the hill. So I don't know for how long we've been digging now, but I'd guess it's maybe 15 minutes. So imagine if you had to go until here. It's probably 3 or 4 hours to dig this tunnel. My longest tunnel has about 4 or 5 kilometers, and it took me maybe 2 days to dig it. And this tunnel really doesn't lead anywhere. I actually diverted a track that I was an unfinished track, which is supposed to go into a totally different direction. But the hill was close, and it was the best place where to demonstrate how tunnels are dug. Now see, this is what I spoke about earlier. You have to watch out for these. Whenever you see one, immediately destroy it, because they're very easy to overlook. So don't... I said like I sweep for them once I'm done with the main digging, but whenever I notice one, I'll remove it immediately because you might not be able to notice it on another pass.
Good hydration secured. You are in a well-fed state.
Also, remember to bring along enough food and water. Because, as said, you'll be spending a lot of time underground when digging a tunnel. For digging tunnels, I always use the, unless I'm really short on some resource, I always use the right mouse button for the main work. Only at the entrances I use the left mouse button to make the edges smoother. But it's essential to use the right mouse button when digging the main part of the tunnel because otherwise it'll take forever. Now that seems fairly this looks okay. Maybe a little too narrow on the left side. We'll see. Remove this thing here. Okay, now that you've dug the tunnel, and again I'm not really trying very hard now, the entrance is quite ugly. Rough edges, but this is just for demonstration purposes. So now you take your splice and you extend the track. What's going on? Okay. And you build it all the way to the back. Again, remember, if you're using a multi-car train, if you go this far, it will mean before you board the train and start driving again, you need to save the game while you're close to the train and load it again, unless you wanna glitch it out. With this single car train, that shouldn't be an issue. Okay, and we see that we're diverting somewhat from the beam. I guess maybe I left the rear part of the train still on the previous track. So that would be maybe it's the glitching. That would be a clear advantage of the other method if you don't have the T8. When you just build the beacon onto the no, we're completely on the track, so yeah, so I guess that's just an inherent error that comes with the train not being exactly parallel to the track. So actually, if you put the beacon on the track like I showed you before, that should yield even better results in terms of preciseness. But then again, you have to dismantle and then rebuild the beacon every single time when you're done with one part of the tunnel. Now that we've built the track, we'll add the pylons, or not really pylons in this case, but rather supports. In tunnels I build them like this. And I build them by hand. I used to have segments for tunnels, which I printed with the replicator, but since there is so little room in the tunnel, unless you dig it very wide, which again then would take much more time, it was very difficult to place them and to align them exactly in the tunnel due to the restricted space. So I don't use that method anymore, and I just build them by hands. It's just a few blocks, so it doesn't take much time. And it actually takes less time than trying to print them. Okay. Now to code them. Code the support. And every single time when you go through the tunnel, even if you're just, even if it's mostly done and you're just going back for some supplies or something, use the opportunity to smoothen the edges, to take away any material that could potentially obstruct the way, and then test the tunnel by driving through and looking at the train from the front side to spot any remains of rock floating in the air, as well as checking the clearance. Always go very slow, because the tiniest collision can result in a derailment. So we're looking good. And we're at the end. Yes. Now, I usually do this. Oh, well, let's build another support here. I usually do this every 3 or 4 supports, but I'll show it to you here in front of this one once it's built. It's not good to build the track as as a single model too long, because that will result in a lag. And also, if a track segment is too long, it loads for a longer time, and that then again results in a more noticeable stutter or lag when the piece is loading, and you want to avoid that as much as possible. So once the next part of the segment is secured to the wall by a support, remove a block and place it back again, and that causes you to have a separate track segment which will load separately from the others, making the ride nice and smooth. So that's how you dig tunnels. I really hate digging tunnels. but they're cool. So that's it. I hope this video answered all your questions or made it clear how to use all the parts of the Ymrich Industries train system. And if you have any questions, please post comments. I'll answer all of them. And yeah, and maybe later I'll make another video on how to build a train. So enjoy.